It's Yemeni coffee for us at the Kawa House in Dearborn as Nolan Finley and Stephen Henderson take on the week's headlines. Plus,
this is the wall that used to demarcate where they're going to have the white neighborhood from the black neighborhood.
head out with Wendell Watkins in the documentary Detroit 48202, Conversations Along a Postal Route. It's a closer look at how housing injustice changes a neighborhood through the years. And meet Detroit artist Che and how she connects with music in the past to find her voice. I'm Christy McDonald. It's all coming up on One Detroit.
Masco Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, craft-made in Merillat cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929. How does diversity bring energy to us all? At DTE Energy, we believe that it's the contributions of all that build great communities. As a company, we grow stronger by welcoming the unique perspectives of everyone. As community members, we support our state's broad culture and heritage. From working closely with women and minority-owned suppliers to embracing our local cultures, DTE Energy is powering diversity. The DTE Energy Foundation is a proud sponsor of Detroit Public Television.
I have a question. Who wants to go first? To win? Who wants to grow our business? Who wants to make more money? Who wants more job opportunities? If you want Michigan to compete and become a top 10 state, raise your hand. Together, we've turned Michigan around and started moving forward. Now help us build a stronger Michigan than ever. Raise your hand at strongermichigan.com.
Support also provided by the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, Detroit Journalism Engagement Fund, and the Bill and Shirley Fox Fund for Leadership and Public Affairs Programming at Detroit Public TV.
Yemeni coffee is the best. We try to educate the people, tell them a story about where we come from and our coffee story, because I want to send a message for everyone. Yemen is not just a place for fight, it's not a place for wars. You can see the good face of Yemen and you can send messages through it. We are a good people, we are a good country, we have a lot of things. At least you start your day with a big smile because of the coffee.
All right, now that I have my coffee and sabaya, welcome to One Detroit. We're at the Kawa House in Dearborn. We'll catch up with Nolan Finley and Stephen Henderson in just a moment, but I want to get you up to speed on what we have coming up on the show. We're going to take a look behind the scenes of a documentary on Detroit called Detroit 48202, Conversations Along a Postal Route. We'll follow Wendell Watkins' route and how it illustrates the impacts of redlining, the fight against housing injustice over the years in this city. Plus, Nolan and Stephen take on the week's headlines and meet Che, a Detroit musician who connects with the city's musical past to make her own name in the business. That's all coming up. All right, so let's get started with Nolan Finley from the Detroit News and Stephen Henderson from WDET Radio. And again, I win in saying we are going to do the show from another coffee shop because this is outstanding.
Not another coffee shop. This is like a different space than any other place.
This is an experience, really. All right, there's a lot going on in the news, and it feels like Michigan. I mean, everybody wants to get in on Michigan and see what we're thinking and feeling when it comes to 2020.
Yeah,
Two presidential candidates here this week. Yeah, what do you think?
Well, I mean, you go back to November of 2016 when everyone said, well, Michigan, that's in the bag. Hillary Clinton didn't even show up here in the last few weeks of the campaign, and she lost. And that was one of the things that helped propel Donald Trump to the presidency. I think every Democrat will have front of mind not repeating that error again next year.
Yeah, that's been drilled into their heads, although they still haven't got the message entirely. You notice that Beto O'Rourke had to hurry up and add a Detroit stop. I think they both did. They had to add a Detroit stop. I mean, they still don't get the importance of coming to Detroit and courting that very important African-American Democratic voter base that stayed home in 2016 because they were ignored.
And not just the African-American base in the city, but the Arab and Muslim population here in Dearborn was one of the things that disappointed Clinton in terms of turnout both in the primary and then again in the general.
A lot of concentration on Macomb County again.
Well, there always will be, because it is a voter-rich county that does seem to mirror the nation, or does seem to be a influence leader in terms of the national vote. You've got to pay attention to Macomb County. But if that's the only place you come to as a Democrat when you come to Michigan,
yeah, you'll definitely be missing out. You know, Governor Whitmer has said, kind of made an open entree to all the candidates. Come to Michigan, make sure you come through here and talk to people about what are the biggest things on their mind. And I asked her, I said, well, what do you think that people will tell the candidates? And she, again, said roads and education, which is really the forefront of her agenda as well. But what do you think are some of the issues that are going to start kind of taking the center stage when it comes to national elections?
The thing that Donald Trump was able to tap into in 2016, I think will again be on people's minds in 2020. And that's this idea that even people who have jobs, have secure jobs at this point, don't feel like they're able to get ahead. It's this sort of lingering economic insecurity people have that they're falling behind. He was able to sell people on the idea that the things that are to blame for that are things like NAFTA, bad trade agreements, bad trade imbalances, and that he would fix them. I think in 2020 the question will be whether he's made enough of that case to prevent Democrats from coming here and saying, you got swindled, right? You bought one thing and you got another.
Yeah, what do you think, Nolan?
I think it was, I agree with that, but I also think it wasn't as much as what he said and the message he brought, as his willingness to take a position, take a stand, and take firm stands, clear stands that people could see and identify with, or at least appreciate the fact that he was willing to say, this is what I believe, this is where I stand. You listen to, and I didn't see much of Gillibrand, but I saw O'Rourke come through yesterday, and every question, he had this nuanced answer where he was afraid to define himself. Donald Trump was not afraid to define himself, and in a crowded primary, that's important, because with 16, 17, 18 people in that primary, you don't need 51% of the vote. So you need a hardcore group of supporters to push you through those early primaries.
Well, speaking about civility, you guys shared a byline this week, which I thought was really interesting.
First time ever.
In the Detroit News,
the
for the first time.
Is near.
Seriously, everything blew up. But I thought it was interesting because, I thought, well, how'd they write this? And you told me, you're like, yeah, I wrote something, he wrote something, we kind of put it together, and I think that totally destroys the mirage of people thinking that you sat in the same room.
People think we did it together.
We're still here, aren't we?
That word doesn't go there.
That
no
would have
way.
led to bigger incivility.
Nolan wrote it
Yeah.
and sent it to me.
How's the project going so far?
Well, it's going good. We're getting a lot of people signed up. This is the Detroit Regional Chambers Civility Project, where we hope to do on Mackinac, or have the people who are attending the Mackinac Policy Conference do what we did a few weeks ago at the Detroit Policy Conference, and that is just sort of lay the groundwork for civil conversations, learn something about each other, and learn to appreciate your differences rather than sort of be threatened by your differences.
Yeah, and so you think that you can kind of put this to scale?
I think so. I think on a community-wide basis, it's possible to get people to think differently about how they interact with people they know or know of, and not indulge insult or worse in sorting out their differences. I think this is a very different kind of experiment from trying to solve the kind of incivil discourse and things that we see at the national level, for instance, right? The breakdown of the ability to just talk about things. I think when you start on the one-on-one level, you have far more opportunity to convince people that it's possible.
Yeah, well, we're going to follow along this project and see how it goes, and kind of check in with some of those people who are going to be getting together and talking about it. All right, thanks, guys. We have a closer look now at a new documentary on Detroit that focuses on housing insecurity and disinvestment in neighborhoods. It's called Detroit 48202, Conversations Along a Postal Route, and it follows mail carrier Wendell Watkins as he sees the changes in the neighborhoods he goes to every day. And those neighborhoods give us a bigger picture look at where the city has come from and where the community wants to see it go next. a small part of Detroit in a zip code where conversations along a postal route give a history of the city revealed through letter carrier Wendell Watkins, on the job for nearly 30 years.
I always thought it would be a pretty cool gig because you get paid pretty well. And you don't have a boss on you all the time. You get to meet a lot of people. It's kind of, I always thought it was kind of cool because, like I said, my grandfather did it. And I thought he was like the coolest guy in the world.
I grew up in Highland Park. Went to Barber Middle School, Highland Park High School, and then I transferred to Cass Tech, which is where I met Wendell. We've known each other since we were 15 years old.
Pam Sporn and her subject talked after a showing of her film at the Detroit Historical Museum.
Then I moved to New York for college and stayed, became a high school teacher, taught for many years. I came, I think it was in 2009, to stay with a friend. And I was just taken aback by the devastation that I saw. So I had a lot of questions. Detroit just became much, much more on my radar than it had been over the last few years.
Within my one route, you have townhouses, really nice apartments, really messed up apartments.
Watkins' route covered parts of New Center and Virginia Park, just north of the Fisher Building.
You have 3 blocks in particular that are very well kept up and very spacious houses. There's 6 or 7 other blocks my route. Half the houses that were there 10 years ago are gone.
And so I said to Wendell, can I follow you around your postal route, and maybe your postal route's like a microcosm for the city. Let's see what we can learn. And he said, fine.
Now this is a hell of a nice building. You think of this drunken brick. You don't hardly even see drunken brick nowadays. The guys that owned it decided not to do anything to it. So all the people that were there left. This is a microcosm of what happens when you get these gigantic corporations buy up places, do absolutely nothing to them. The people that want to live there leave. So then they just board it up and hold it for speculation.
I thought it was going to be a 20-minute short.
This is typical. This is like one of maybe 9 buildings in my route that ended up like this.
Come in, follow Wendell around for a week, slice of life, day in the life of a mail carrier. We learn all about Detroit. But then I realized that the depth of analysis and the necessary historical context wasn't going to be delivered in that short amount of time. And particularly because the narrative about Detroit has been so oversimplified, I wanted to make sure that we got things that really looked at history critically.
I remember growing up hearing all these stories about how great Detroit used to be, with the understanding that it never would be great again, that's kind of how people talked about it, and me wondering why that was true, what changed, why weren't things being fixed up, why weren't places looking beautiful again, and it was a question that plagues me. I loved the city, and I didn't want to have to move, but I was being told that the way to be successful was to move away. My great-grandmother was the first to come to Detroit from Hurtsboro, Alabama.
Hurtsboro.
Which is a really interesting name, right?
It hurt down here, boy.
Excited to get out of here, it hurts.
My grandfather would always encourage us to be curious, and my mother, being his daughter, always did the same. And I was always very curious and had a lot of questions to ask people, and as a result, I kind of always was very interested in people and what they had to say. You got here right before I got here, right? January '86?
I moved in October of '87.
Okay. Most of the people that are actually in the movie have been on the route for at least 5-6 years, and some for a lot longer than that.
When I was growing up, it was mostly professional people, working class people. They kept their lawns up. We had dogs. You know, it was back in the day when it was safe to play on the street. You know, there was a time when you could get on the bus and go downtown and shop for whatever you needed. You know, come home with a bunch of bags. My grandmother would dress us up to take us downtown.
This building does stand out, though, to me.
You think so?
Absolutely.
There are really wonderful people in this building. We're more like one big family, and the manager of the building is our mama.
You were the first black manager around here, too?
I think I was.
I think my favorite part of the film is talking to Miss Owens, where Miss Owens tells us about her growing up, and those descriptions are so vivid.
Let me tell you about Hastings.
Yeah, there you go.
Now, this is just sketches.
Sure, that's what it's all about.
You know, there was the Willis Theater. I saw vaudeville at the Willis show.
Do you remember he asked you something?
Was it Ma Rainey?
Oh, get out of here.
Huh?
Jesus Christ, that's a long
time ago.
I learned so much.
The presence of any African Americans in a neighborhood meant that a neighborhood was colored red on the maps that were used by banks to determine whether or not a neighborhood was safe for lending.
A lot of people who see the film remark about the redlining map. They said, that map is for every city. And we see this pattern repeated around the country where neighborhoods were selected for being disinvested and being abandoned, and there are people in those neighborhoods. It's not just, it's like we think of houses and home loans, but that's people involved in that. So when you're saying you're not going to, yes, you draw a red line around a map, but you're drawing red lines around people.
Sporn and Watkins head north on Woodward up to 8 Mile and west to Wyoming to see a landmark from the 1940s called the Burwood Wall.
So once I learned about it, I said, okay, well, this has got to be explored in this film.
This is the wall that used to demarcate where they're going to have the white neighborhood from the black neighborhood. One side black, the other side white. Just simple as that. When redlining at its most literal.
We used to hang out with a friend who lived on Griggs near almost to 8 Mile, I think, around there, which is just a few blocks from where the Burwood Wall is. And I never knew anything about that.
You want to talk about what I think about the people from Detroit that I talked to that saw ordinance in the movie, was how much they didn't know about any of this stuff. It's not just that it's here, but it's that that happened, you know. A whole lot of people from the South came up here, black and white, with the same old attitudes. Yeah, in the North. Detroit's always been up South. Everybody kind of knows this. It's just like this cartoon kindergarten type explanation about everything happening in Detroit. Well, you know, we don't know how to run nothing, and you know, well, here's burned up the city, or you know, my neighborhood is nothing like it used to be because once this happened. It's all nonsense. It's like easily compartmentalized way of explaining things that you don't understand, which unfortunately is a human trait. If you don't understand it, you want to understand it, even if it's nonsense. You actually have to learn to understand something. It takes too much time. I don't want to see something that I have to think about. I was wondering, do you recognize any of these people up here? Yeah. Yeah?
In the last conversations in the film, Watkins gives some of his history to school children who've come to the neighborhood.
It's a newspaper ad from the Detroit News, I believe, from the day that I was born. In April 24th, 1956. 2 rooms, partially furnished, newly decorated, good transportation, shopping, white adults.
What do that mean?
That means they only would rent it to white people. Look at this, it's colored, colored.
And I thought, oh, to do these kinds of histories is healing work. It's not just history. It's healing to tell children, this is not you.
Got rid of this kind of nonsense. People fought together and organized and worked hard to make sure things like this wouldn't happen anymore. All right.
It's a real moment of hope. It's also a cry for us to consider, like, who's the most important? Those children should be the priority for all of us when we think about reimagining and revitalizing a city.
You can catch the documentary next week or just go to DetroitPBS.org where it is streaming. And finally, we're always looking to introduce you to interesting people doing unique things around Detroit. Our associate producer, Will Glover, met up with Che. She's a musician at Hello Records in Corktown, and she's making her way in the business by connecting with Detroit's musical past and sharing her personal struggles in her music. Take a look.
My name is Detroit Che. I'm from Detroit, Michigan, and this is my High 16.
Just give me a little bit about yourself and your background. Where'd you grow up? And, you know, just give me some details.
I grew up on the west side, Detroit, 7 Mile. I mess with the east side too, still all Detroit. I think my first performance, my mom would make me like rap because like she knew I liked music, but I was still, like I said, still was doing basketball and stuff.
Move.
Exactly, like come on baby, do your little dance. It's like, Mom, come on.
Not DJ drama, I promise you I don't want any problems, but I've been crossed by this competition, logos on them pockets. I've been fighting with mama, she wants me.
About what age would you say you started actually getting into music and looking at it as a serious path for your life?
I probably have to say like 2015, after the BT Hip Hop Award Cypher, is when I really was like, oh wow, like this is real. Like I can actually make a living, and not just make a living, but I can actually make an impact off of this.
From Detroit, Michigan, homie, yes, the home of the Lions. My homies was dying, rock hoodies during moments of silence. Passionate, practicing, activist, dope with his shady capitalist.
Who's your ideal listener?
I think my music is for an audience of listeners who appreciates realism. If you're listening to my music and you can't like take away who this person is after listening to it, I don't feel accomplished as an artist. I mean, hip hop solely. You know, it's reality, it's life.
I'm gonna read you a line from a song that you put out in 2014 and a line from a song that you recently put out. You them bricks ain't yours, that ain't yours.
Ooh, that's act like one.
To now, I could change the world if I stop drinking, if I start thinking.
Yes.
How do we get from 2014 to where we are today?
It was just necessary changes that I had to go through, just maturity, and I didn't want to use my platform in a diminishing way, I guess, to the listeners. And even still now, like I'm becoming more aware of my influence.
Tell me something about Che that most people wouldn't know or most people wouldn't suspect.
I guess the most intimate thing would be, you know, just a constant battle with just depression. You know, I've already exposed that side of me, however, but it's not a thing that just ended. You know, it doesn't have like an ending period. It's still things that I'm going through as an artist. If that's something that I can tell people, it's like, you know, the verses that I made years ago about depression and everything, those things still reside with me.
Because I still see no changes. I hated my ways, so I try to erase them with a gun to my head, but I ain't cold banging and I'm
What
still
differentiates a Detroit artist from anybody else in the world?
I just think that, like, and this may sound cliche, but it's honest, I just think Detroit breeds a different type of just human being. Looking back on the examples that we had, you know, looking back at Motown music. And now I'm not trying to compare and contrast or anything like that, but it's like, as an artist, if I'm not aware of my history, I don't know how to continue the Detroit legacy as a person or as an artist. Right. So I don't know, I feel like Detroit just breeds just a different type of hustle. Like I can go somewhere and people be like, you from the D? Yeah.
And that is going to do it for us. Thanks to the Kawa House in Dearborn for having us. Excellent, guys. We appreciate it. Make sure you check us out at DetroitPBS.org and on Facebook and Twitter during the week. I'm Christy McDonald. We will see you next time. Take care. This is outstanding. The coffee is amazing.
Masco Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, craft-made in Merillat cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929. How does diversity bring energy to us all? At DTE Energy, we believe that it's the contributions of all that build great communities. As a company, we grow stronger by welcoming the unique perspectives of everyone. As community members, we support our state's broad culture and heritage. From working closely with women and minority-owned suppliers to embracing our local cultures, DTE Energy is powering diversity. The DTE Energy Foundation is a proud sponsor of Detroit Public Television.
I have a question. Who wants to go first? To win? Who wants to grow our business? Who wants to make more money? Who wants more job opportunities? If you want Michigan to compete and become a top 10 state, Raise your hand. Together, we've turned Michigan around and started moving forward. Now help us build a stronger Michigan than ever. Raise your hand at strongermichigan.com.
Support also provided by the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, Detroit Journalism Engagement Fund, and the Bill and Shirley Fox Fund for Leadership and Public Affairs Programming at Detroit Public TV.